Imagine yourself as an unnamed woman, living quietly in the shadow of towering figures, where glory seems reserved for others, yet God's gaze rests on you. Zilpah and Bilhah, Jacob's concubines, are humble figures nearly forgotten by history across millennia. No lofty hymns praise them, no marble monuments bear their names. Yet they were the silent mothers of 4 of Israel's tribes. Their quiet sacrifices laid foundation stones for a divine plan. Have you ever pondered how God uses the overlooked to write epic history? Step into Canaan's desert, tracing a journey where grace and redemption shine through pain. Don't forget to follow the channel to uncover untold stories that stir the soul. The scorching Canaan sun blazed over endless dunes, wind swirling golden dust onto 2 small figures. Zilpah, sharp-eyed and calloused from servitude, belonged to Leah. Bilhah, gentle yet resolute, was Rachel's trusted maid. When Jacob wed the sisters, they entered the Paddan Aram camp with simple dreams, to be seen as fully human. Yet in a clan blessed by God's promise, they were but silent footsteps behind a curtain of jealousy. The harsh desert framed women's fates with 2 words: bear children. Choice didn't belong to Zilpah or Bilhah. Their futures rested in their master's hands. Still, a coal of faith glowed beneath the ash of longing. They knew Abraham was called the father of faith, not just for the exalted, but for the nameless too. As Rachel and Leah plunged into a jealous race, Zilpah and Bilhah became pawns, reluctant surrogate mothers. Each child's laugh brought them joy, yet deepened the wound of their faint identity. One dawn, Leah gave Zilpah a pained look and ordered her to Jacob's tent. Zilpah walked past tent poles like a willing prisoner, whispering, "May God be with me." Soon after, Rachel, loveliest but barren, pushed Bilhah into the same vortex. To the nomadic community, they were hired wombs, but in heaven the all-knowing recorded every tear. Time passed quietly, Zilpah's belly swelling under coarse cloth. She still hauled water, washed garments, but at night laid hands on her unborn, murmuring, "You are God's blessing." Bilhah shared barley bread with her sisters, singing ancient lullabies of the God who sees me. A thread of empathy bound their lonely souls, giving courage to face scornful glances. Childbirth came amid a sandstorm. Gad's cry tore through the desert wind, followed by Asher's not long after. Zilpah named her sons Blessing and Happiness, a gentle defiance against disdain. Bilhah bore Dan and Naphtali under a crescent moon, etching justice and victory into their names. With 4 names, the mother stamped faith onto the future, silently affirming God was still writing their story. The boys grew, romping among sheep. One dusk, Gad was teased by cousins. "Your mother's just a slave." He ran sobbing to Zilpah. She held him, recounting Joseph, sold yet a family savior. "If God has plans for the despised, he has plans for you." Hope's seed, like dews on dry sand, took root in the boy's heart. The camp's air thickened with envy. Rachel flaunted Dan and Naphtali as trophies, prompting Leah to counter with Gad and Asher. The inheritance feud flared, naming the concubines as property. That night, winds shifted, sand cloaking the tents. In a cramped tent corner, Zilpah and Bilhah lit an oil lamp, knelt, and prayed psalms, yielding their grievances to the righteous one. Dawn broke in strange stillness. Jacob summoned the extended family. His face bore scars of nights wrestling by the Jabbok, his voice hoarse but firm. All 12 boys are my sons, all part of the covenant. The words slashed through divisive chords. Rachel and Leah fell silent. Gossip evaporated like dew under desert sun. From then, an oasis of grace sprouted. Zilpah and Bilhah's tent opened nightly, welcoming children to hear of Sarah, Hagar, Ruth. They hand-copied "God Who Sees Me" on sheepskin, hanging it by the hearth, a reminder that dignity comes not from social rank, but from God's breath. Their storytelling fire soothed the tribe's soul, healing wounds of division. Years passed when Dan and Naphtali led flocks over Golan Hills, forging paths to the Jordan Valley. When Israel's 12 tribes were named, theirs stood proud beside those of the primary wives. The legacy of two belittled mothers flowed like an underground stream, nourishing faith's tree through generations. Today, in America's neon-lit streets, their story echoes as a blessing. Every undervalued soul is in the Creator's sight. A single mother, an immigrant toiling in a diner kitchen, or anyone shrouded in anonymity, all can be God's pen for a new chapter. When life's sun scorches, recall Canaan's desert, where golden dust coated two small women. Yet under grace's light, they shone like undying stars. Don't let silence make you a bystander to history. Share Zilpah and Bilhah's journey with friends, children, anyone who feels too small to be remembered. It's a call to rise for divine justice, from quiet living rooms to college halls, suburban churches to vibrant social media. As their story resounds, grace resounds, and the darkness of prejudice retreats. One day, Leah, her heart bleeding from Jacob's aloofness, laid a hand on Zilpah's shoulder, commanding her to bear a child in her stead. The order sounded like a needle's soft glide, but cut deep into the maid's dignity. Zilpah entered the master's tent with only one possession, faith that God's grace still covered her despite human harshness. Soon after, Rachel, desperate in her barrenness, gave Bilhah to Jacob. Two fragile souls were swept into a contest not theirs, a battle of procreation cloaked in family honor, but hiding bitter cruelty. In the tribe, venomous gossip ricocheted, branding concubine's child onto cradles yet to be woven. Men hammered tent stakes, women spun wool, children scampered. But behind them, whispers clung. They're just lowborn, their sons will be too. Prejudice's shadow draped Padan Aram's camp like desert dust on a coarse cloak. Yet in the hearts of the two women, faith's embers glowed, awaiting a breeze to blaze. That night, Zilpah knelt by dying ashes, eyes shut, seeking rare warmth. A dream came. An angel leaned close, voice soft as wind through palm fronds. God sees the forgotten. The sound, light as dew, weighed like carved stone, planting courage in a burning desert. She woke with trembling hands, but eyes bright as red-hot coals. Henceforth, each breath of Zilpah's would pray for lowly hearts. Bilhah, in silence, sensed God's voice through her trembling pulse whenever Rachel snapped, "You must bear a child for my honor." Sweat and tears mingled with hot sand, but in cracked earth, hope's seed sprouted, defying drought. Bilhah touched her flat belly, whispering, "The Almighty plants blessings where the world sees burdens." That conviction became an underground spring, watering the maid's heart. Birth came amid howling winds. Zilpah writhed in hot dust. Each contraction was a blade reminding her of her lowly lot. When the first cry rang out, she named her son Gad, blessing, a manifesto hurled at bias. Soon Asher was born in a fiery afternoon. His laughter mixed with blowing sand, heralding happiness rising from parched ground. Zilpah held her infants, eyes brimming. "Whatever they call you, God's covenant will call you heirs." Bilhah labored under a crescent moon. Her first son's cry prompted her to whisper Dan, justice. Her second, born in dawn's pale glow, was Naphtali, my struggle prevails. 4 names sealed promises on sand, etched faith into the air, defying every murmur of denial. Time passed, the boys growing on grassy plains. One dusk, Gad was mocked by cousins, "Your mother's a slave." Sobbing, he ran to Zilpah. She wiped his tears, recounting Hagar's desert encounter with God, named the one who sees me. Hugging him close, Zilpah said, "If God saw Hagar, he surely sees us. You're not defined by men's words, but by heaven's gaze." The words, like a trumpet, rallied the boy's soul, lifting his chin to fetch water the next day. Bilhah set up a small tent corner, hanging a sheepskin inscribed, "The humble will be exalted." Each evening she shared barley bread and curdled milk, inviting children to gather. She told of Sarah laughing under stars, Ruth pledging in barley fields, Rahab tying a scarlet cord. The flickering fire lit gap-toothed smiles. The kids memorized tales before tying sandal straps. But the fire of Leah and Rachel's rivalry still raged. When Rachel cradled Dan, she spun proudly, "My son proves God favors me." Leah retorted with a smug smile, "Asher says happiness is mine." Their verbal volleys turned the family camp into an honor arena, dragging the concubines into the crossfire as easy targets. One night their feud peaked and Jacob fled the tent, stepping into darkness, sand whipping his cloak. At dawn, Zilpah and Bilhah met by the water's edge. Wordless, they clasped hands, sharing courage. They knew the storm of envy didn't just threaten status, but their children's identity. They resolved to break their silence. That evening, the tribe gathered before the main tent. Leah and Rachel raised their voices, but Zilpah stepped forward, her tone low and steady. "God's grace doesn't distinguish mothers. He weighs hearts, not lineage." Bilhah followed, sharing a dream of justice. "The Almighty will restore honor to the despised." Truth gleamed like a polished sword. The tribe fell silent. Suddenly Jacob, who'd let strife fester, raised his hand. He recalled wrestling the angel by the Jabbok, earning the name Israel, he who strives with God and prevails. His voice thundered, rare in the desert. "All 12 sons share my blood, share the covenant. To scorn one is to scorn God's word." The decree, like a silver latch, sealed the door on division. Leah bowed her head. Rachel ceased arguing. The children linked arms, feeling their father's defense for the first time. From that day, a new tent rose in Padan Aram, Grace's tent, by the sand's edge. Zilpah and Bilhah took turns hosting travelers, pouring water, recounting a God who watches the forgotten. Wayfarers stopped, thirsty for water and hope, leaving with full jars and warm hearts. Their testimony spread, rising like incense over the plains, whispering that human worth comes not from rank, but from God's seal. Years later, as Israel counted 12 tribes, Gad, Asher, Dan, and Naphtali stood tall beside Reuben, Judah, Joseph. Genealogies carved in stone named no mother's status. Grace, light as wind, hard as rock, slipped through prejudice's cracks, lifting the lowly to stand firm in faith's great family. Today, in America's bustling streets, this story beckons. It reminds the woman wiping tables late, the nurse with bleach-stained scrubs, the immigrant drained under diner lights. God sees the forgotten. You may rank last on lists, but you're first in heaven's gaze. Like Zilpah and Bilhah, weave hope with resilient thread. Name your pain as blessing. So history looks back and sees stars shining in the darkest skies. As this video ends, don't just close the screen. Recall two powerless women who shifted salvation's current. Share their story with those nearby, letting grace's seeds sprout in the driest soils. And when prejudice's storm whips, stand like Zilpah, whispering God sees and smiles like Bilhah, a smile certain that justice will prevail. Zilpah turned each labor into a worship ritual. When Gad's first cry rang out, she named him blessing. At Asher's birth, she wept with joy, calling him happiness. With a worn, beaded strand, she taught her sons to recite God's promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, repeating that the despised still belonged to the covenant. Bilhah, gentle yet profound, cupped her hands against the wind, singing ancient hymns to Dan and Naphtali. Dan's name carved her belief. God has judged. Naphtali declared, my struggle triumphs. One night, lulling her boys, she heard an old shepherd recount a prophecy that the humble would be exalted. Her heart surged like tent cloth in a breeze, affirming what God had sown in her dreams. From silent empathy, the two women built a small tent corner. They called it the Oasis of Grace. In the low goatskin-roofed space, they kindled a fire each dusk, sharing roasted sesame and tales of Sarah laughing under starry nights, Hagar weeping by a lonely well, Rebecca wiping tears to follow a distant call. They reminded each other that faith always outgrew status's shackles. Camp children, legitimate and secondary alike, swung on grass ropes, then slipped inside, eager for stories. Leah and Rachel's sons lingered at the circle's edge, mouthing hymns to the Holy One. Young laughter mingled with crackling flames, sparking unexpected hope that spread beyond the camp, softening the weight of gossip, though its sting lingered. Yet human pride doesn't yield easily. When Rachel and Leah sensed the children's hearts tilting toward the concubine mothers, jealousy surged. The family's woven threads frayed like grass cracking under drought sun. Rachel demanded Bilhah's tent be moved to the camp's fringe, citing new grazing space for livestock. Leah swiftly fenced her own tents, claiming to guard tradition. Whispers slithered among tent poles. Shouldn't concubine sons stay with their mothers, away from the main line? Children's eyes grew wary, and the Oasis of Grace saw fewer footsteps. One night, a hot eastern wind roared, whipping fine sand through tent seams, keening like a mournful flute. Zilpah clutched her beads, Bilhah knelt by the ember hearth, their clasped hands trembling with the flames. They prayed for the children's peace, for the primary wives' hearts to soften. In the hush after their whispers, Bilhah dozed, dreaming she stood on a bare hill under faint moonlight. An unseen ladder lifted her, and a voice light as mist spoke. I raise the lowly that my name shines. She woke, embers glinting like an angel's eyes, knowing the decisive moment had come. The next morning, an unseasonal sandstorm erupted, swallowing the camp's paths. Children's cries echoed from the edge, where Gad and Dan had led young lambs to drink before the storm hit. Sand thickened, stalling adults, but Zilpah wrapped her scarf and plunged into the dust like an arrow. Bilhah followed, small but agile feet tracking faint sounds. They found the boys huddled in a rock hollow, eyes red from sand and fear. Zilpah pressed Gad to her chest, wordless, letting him feel her heartbeat. Bilhah fanned dust away, untying her headscarf to shield Dan's face, humming a brief hymn to melt his fear. On the return, a whirlwind grazed the ground, nearly lifting them from the sand. Zilpah drove her shepherd's staff into the hot earth, pulling Bilhah to grip it. The four small figures formed an anchor in the red sand sea. The staff quaked but held. As the gale retreated, they saw a slim blue streak in the sky, a window of hope. The image of two concubine mothers steadfastly guiding their sons through the storm raced through the camp, paired with the new whisper, "If God kept them standing, who dares call them lowly?" Leah stood at her tent's edge, fingers clutching her robe as Gad greeted her with a forgiving smile. Rachel watched Bilhah brush sand from Dan's hair, her eyes blurring as if pride's veil had been lifted. That afternoon, the sun softened unexpectedly. Jacob, long avoidant of conflict, called the extended family together. He paused long before speaking, his voice hoarse but firm, declaring every child, regardless of mother, as covenant blood. Proof God valued every mother who placed faith above self. He ordered the new fences torn down, the oasis of grace moved to the camp's heart, so their fire lights us all. As darkness fell, the oasis of grace blazed. Children sat in a wide circle. Leah brought fresh leavened bread, Rachel date wineskins. Zilpah recounted the storm's passage, not dwelling on danger, but on the moment the staff rooted in sand, like planting faith amid tempests. Bilhah sang the old hymn, now public for the first time. Its simple melody soared, harmonizing with the night wind's rustle. In the firelight, children's faces glowed, and worry's creases on adult brows eased. The next day, Padana Aram awoke to a new air. Sheep fanned across green fields, still damp from night rain, the scent of wet earth blending with warm camel milk pots. Jacob had a wooden stake driven deep to mark the oasis of grace as the camp's hub, a reminder that where faith's fire burned, family stood firm. Leah wove a multicolored rug, placing it under Zilpah's feet as she told stories. Rachel leaned on her spinning wheel, watching Dan practice reed pipes, softly humming with Bilhah. Shepherd's calls echoed down the valley, joining children reciting, "God has judged, I have triumphed. Blessing and happiness pursue those who trust him." From all desert corners, travelers heard the tale, seeking rest at the camp. They arrived with wounds, debts, self-doubt. The oasis of grace open, offering fresh water, new-baked bread. Departing, they spread the story of two concubine mothers braving a sandstorm, each retelling Wavai in more faith. Some said, "If he lifted them, surely he watches me." Thus, the tiny oasis in dry land became an underground stream flowing far, its drinkers beyond count. Years later, as priests penned genealogies, they paused at Gedi, Asher, Dan, Naphtali. They recalled the sandstorm, the tent fire burning through the night, two figures shielding children in the gale. Carefully, they etched a small note beside the tablet. Sons of unnamed mothers, but their faith will be retold forever. The words, ungilded, shimmered under sunlight like glinting sand, small but enduring, like grace outlasting every tempest. If you're hearing this in a noisy kitchen, an exhausting night shift, or a quiet library corner, think of the oasis of grace. Turn a seemingly small moment, patience, encouragement, a step beyond comfort, into a staff driven into life's sand. Life's storms may lash, but in the sprawling desert, God sends winds to lift the humble, letting blessing, happiness, justice, and triumph resound like four names born from the wombs of two forgotten mothers, eternally remembered by him. That evening, Canaan's wind howled through the burning sands, swirling red dust across Padanaram's camp. Sheep bleated in confusion, clotheslines slapped against wooden stakes, signaling trouble. Rachel, regal in beauty but heavy with despair, stormed to the central tent, eyes blazing. Her scream shattered like a dropped water jar. The concubine's sons belonged to her, her glory unshared. Leah emerged from the opposite tent, gray cloak dust-streaked, heart bitter from neglect. She countered, claiming Gad and Asher for her own. Their shouts, like twin daggers, tore the air, freezing shepherds mid-task, hands halted in midair. Children huddled behind the straw piles, their sobs flickering with the wind. Amid the furious clash, Zilpah sank to the sand. The hot grains seared through her coarse skirt, branding her thin knees, but physical pain paled beside the echo of an old dream. She pressed a trembling hand to her chest, whispering, "The God who sees me," as Hagar the Egyptian maid once did in the wilderness. As if answering, a cool northern breeze swept through, lifting the tent flap, letting the day's last light scatter golden flecks on her hair. In that fleeting stillness, the clamor receded like a beast's footsteps fading into the desert. Zilpah rose, her slight frame steady, her voice clear and firm. She didn't shout. Each soft word rang like a ram's horn, heralding dawn. She declared her sons were given to God before the world, that if the ever-living one deemed them covenant heirs, no one could deny them. Each syllable rolled through the dry air like rare rain quenching long thirst. Bilhah stirred, felt untested courage surge. She stepped forward, dusty skirt brushing her ankles, standing shoulder to shoulder with her sister maid in a rare unity. She spoke of her dream where the Almighty exalted the lowly, affirming Dan and Naphtali bore heaven's mark, not a secondary brand. The confession of two forgotten women echoed off tent walls, silencing scornful laughter. Then Jacob appeared. For years, he'd let the jealous race rage like a dwindling stream, quietly moving tents, digging channels, dodging storms. But today, his eyes glistened, as if recalling the night he wrestled an angel by the Jabbok, learning to seize blessing through pain. He looked at his chief wives, his concubines trembling, the children with foxtail grass still on their hands, and spoke in a voice rough from long roads. All 12 sons, no matter their status, stood under God's covenant. To despise one was to despise the covenant maker. Each low note of his voice drove like iron nails into the sandy ground, halting pride's waves. Without sword or whip, the storm of arrogance shattered, leaving the dusk's quiet dew. No one spoke. Rachel bowed her head, hands that once gripped her braids now limp. Leah touched her chest, where her heart pulsed with regret, then turned to her tent. Only then did Zilpah collapse, arms wrapping Gad and Asher, who clung in fear. Tears mingled with a smile, tracing sun-darkened cheeks, glinting like dew on desert wheat. Bilhah inhaled deeply, clutching Dan and Naphtali, feeling their small chests heave with trust. Today's victory wasn't the mighty's glory, but the quiet triumph of enduring faith. At twilight, the sun sank behind rocky hills, bathing Padan Aram in amber. Shepherds slowly gathered flocks, their glances toward the concubines carrying newfound respect. Yesterday's whispers burned like dry grass touched by flame, then faded. That night, before the central tent, Jacob lit a great fire. He called all to gather. The two wives sat near, the concubines opposite, children ringed between. Jacob read God's promise to Abraham, "I will make your offspring as numerous as the stars." Turning to his sons, he declared, "Stars don't rank by brightness, so each child was a star destined for Israel's sky." They passed simple bread and a skin of date honey, reminded that grace brims only when shared. Zilpah and Bilhah left the fire, leading their sons to the oasis of grace. They shook off dust, latched the tent flap, and softly told a new story. When pride surged, God used the silent to restore peace. When human worth was ranked secondary, he carved the forgotten's names on covenant stone. Gad looked up, eyes shining in the oil lamp's glow, asking why God chose them. Zilpah laid a hand on his heart, her voice a breeze. Because grace seeks no pedigree, only faith. Dan listened, small hand gripping the old beaded strand, like clutching a rope anchoring him to boundless hope. Night stretched, the moon high over the sleeping camp, but the oasis of grace stayed awake. Zilpah mended a torn cloak's hem, Bilhah stacked dry wood. They knew today's strife had calmed, but undercurrents loomed, yet they no longer feared. From the moment they knelt in sand, they claimed a new identity, bearers of proof that God provides for the lowly. Instead of hiding, they would step out, telling every traveler a story of transformation not by force, but by steadfast trust. The next morning, Jacob had a wooden pillar raised in the courtyard, a sign of reconciliation. He hung a leather plaque, 12 torches, one covenant. At his command, the oasis of Grace's tent was moved to the camp's heart, visible to all passers-by. As the pillar sank deep, the hammer's strikes on dry ground echoed like a promise taking root. Leah wove garnet thread into a new tent curtain. Rachel brought a vial of oil, dripping magnolia scent onto the earth. Small gestures, but enough to open healing's vein. Good news sped beyond the camp, across dunes, carried by Hebron's traders. Jacob's house had 12 sons, equal heirs, no rank dividing. The tale became the first proof of a tribe becoming a nation, Its foundation not dominant blood, but covenant blood. At its core, two forgotten mothers emerged as pivotal in salvation's drama. On the horizon, a new dawn broke, streaking clouds with amber and charcoal. Wind stirred, carrying children's laughter. Zilpah breathed deep, the hot sand laced with morning dew, silently thanking the breeze of grace that turned pride's storm into cooling breath. She glanced at Bilhah, their eyes meeting in understanding. The journey didn't end here, but they'd crossed its narrowest pass. They would keep telling, keep kindling fires, keep teaching their sons of a God who sees, bears scorn, and lifts high. And as the boys grew, leaving camp to lead their tribes toward the promised land, they'd carry the memory of that red dust afternoon, when two concubine mothers' faith stilled a storm, etching the truth. Human worth is sealed by God, not social rank. Gad, Asher, Dan, Naphtali, four boys once labeled concubine sons, grew under Paddan Aram's sun and wind into four living pillars of future Israel. As young lambs grazed golden grass and desert gusts scoured tent walls, these youths memorized Abraham's promise through Zilpah and Bilhah's warm, steady voices. They matured bearing grace's mark, not noble lineage. Years later, as Israel crossed the Jordan into the promised land, four once lowly names shone on the new map, neatly completing the 12 tribes, sealing an inviolable covenant. Chroniclers in the era of kings recorded their origins, and beside Gad, Asher, Dan, Naphtali, they always added, their mothers were maids, yet God called them noble. The small note, like a delicate pen stroke, cut through layers of pride. Jewish children by coal fires heard the tale, learning God doesn't see class as man does. The marginalized remain in heaven's sight. Tears hidden in darkness are gathered into celestial pearl lakes. Centuries later, caravan dust blurred the traveler's steps, but the memory of two mothers in a windswept tent still wafted quietly. Whenever a Jewish girl felt inferior, her grandmother would say, "Remember Bilhah and Zilpah. They had no thrones, no halos, only faith." And that sufficed for God to shift history's axis. The words, like a red thread, wove courage through generations, strengthening the fragile fabric of human lives. From the Middle Eastern desert, the tale silently crossed annals, seas, and reached the gleaming cities of the new continent. On America's lit boulevards, amid a culture ranking people by salary, looks, or resumes, the story of four concubine sons rings like a metal chime piercing vanity. It reminds us of another value system, grace's measure, not based on credentials or designer labels, but on the heart's depth. Picture a New York waitress working the night shift, her calloused hands serving cups, her heart dreaming of her child's college fund. Or a single mother in Atlanta, juggling two jobs to start a small neighborhood scholarship. They may be ignored, as Zilpah and Bilhah were sidestepped at the camp's edge. Yet each quiet step they take could be a stroke of God's pen, shaping the next chapter, one where mercy trumps comfort, divine justice outshines gilded prejudice. The weight of this ordinary drama lies not in breathless battles, but in sweat beading on the humble's brow, stubbornly claiming a fair share, even if just crumbs from the high table. Look back, and history brims with the fingerprints of the overlooked: coal miners, night nurses, the first minority voters. all holding hands with Zilpah and Bilhah across time's span. So today's call reaches every American listener with busy ears. Don't let flashy labels hide the light beneath human dust. Amid the grind of KPIs, remember God doesn't manage us by growth charts. He looks where courage meets humility. He cares how you lift the weak, how you hear cries drowned out by social media's roar. If you've ever felt last on the list, don't hesitate to knock at the oasis of grace, where Zilpah and Bilhah's shadows still kindle fires. Place your story beside theirs, letting the God who sees me soothe self-doubt. Perhaps your seemingly bland page will be the pivotal passage helping someone find forgiveness's path. But the tale doesn't rest in sentiment. It blazes into a rallying cry. Speak for today's labeled children, immigrant kids, students short on funds, women returning to school after family burdens. Use your vote, advocacy, paycheck, and social media to clear promised land for them to stand. In doing so, you echo Jacob's decree that all 12 sons shared one covenant, planting a wooden stake of justice in humanity's camp. Can a YouTube video shift prejudice? The answer lies in Gad's gaze as he heard his mother read the promise, in Dan's smile as Hagar's Egyptian blood mingled with the Jordan's flow. A timely story can be a needle-piercing apathy's wall. A soundbite can touch a mind weary from bad news, igniting a mustard seed hope God says can move mountains. That's why this channel exists, not to echo glitzy tales, but to probe the sediment where nameless tears glint like buried crystal. Each episode is a small spade, digging up hardened bias and casting it from hope's vineyard. Each share, each comment is a new hand helping, turning a grace-soaked stream into a cascade to wash away long-held scorn. So, as this video closes, don't just swipe to the next clip. Pause a minute, think of Zilpah, Bilhah, and 4 boys marked for lesser destinies. Look in the mirror, ask, who's waiting for me to see them? Then step out, helping them reach the covenant God wrote for them. For perhaps, as you extend your hand, a new tribe, a family, a community project, a generation of kind citizens will be born. Zilpah and Bilhah's story proves grace forgets no one. Hit subscribe, comment your thoughts, spread hope across America. May God bless you. See you in the journey with Deborah, the fearless prophetess.